Hi, I'm Don Clancy. I've been a Pottsgrove resident for 15 years now, and in the past 10 years I've seen a substantial decline in the school district. We've gone from ranked roughly 84th 10 years ago to 376th now in terms of test scores, and that's probably the most concerning thing that's affecting our community right now. We've also seen our tax rates increase by 39% over 10 years, roughly 4% per year, which might be matched by other communities, but at the same time was starting with one of the higher tax rates in Montgomery County to start with. So we've seen our tax rates well exceed what's normal for Montgomery County. So it would seem we're not getting very good value for the money we're spending, and we're seeing things go the wrong direction. So I think it's time for a change. We need to have...
I'm not going to need to ask any questions. You guys are good at this.
We've been going in the wrong direction for the past 10 years. And it's something that I think that, when push came to shove and we had the center's decision, and I've been evaluating the situation for quite some time now as an unhappy resident, that I approached Rick after the center's decision and said, I'd like to partner or run against the board. So again, Don Clancy, that's why I'm running for board.
Okay. Next, please.
My name's Matt Alexander. I've been a Pottsgrove School District resident for 9 years now. I've got 2 young children in the system right now, one in the middle school and one in the elementary school system, and I've got another one that's getting ready to start here in a few years. I can only echo the concerns that Don just named, and with children coming in and looking at another 12 to or so years with kids in the schools, and the concerns that we have on the education that they're receiving and the test scores going down the way they have. When we chose to move into the district almost 10 years ago, the numbers were a lot better, and we actually chose based on the quality of the school system versus school systems that were directly surrounding Pottsgrove. And we've been here for the decline, and we'd like to see it turn around.
Okay.
Kelley, Crist. Have been a Pottsgrove resident with my husband for 6 years now. 2 girls, one currently in the Pottsgrove School District in Lower Pottsgrove Elementary, and one starting Rocks in the fall. A very similar situation to Matt. When we were looking for homes to purchase before we moved into the district, we weren't happy with the school district that we were in, so we had put a lot of research into the school districts that our kids would be attending. And I honestly can say I was complacent for the first couple of years that we were here because I didn't have children in the district. It wasn't something that was top on my list of priorities to pay attention to. And then when my oldest started school, my first involvement in attending board meetings was when we were discussing the Rocks renovation. So that was probably one of the first meetings that I attended, and then the whole center's debate came up, and a lot of things came out of that, and I just wasn't happy with the way the school district was going. And like Matt said, we have quite a few more years here, and when we bought our home 6 years ago, we didn't plan on moving 6 years or 12 years. We planned on spending the rest of the time in the district so our kids could go from K through 12 and then go from there. So you can sit around and complain and point fingers and everything else, but if you're not willing to step up and do something about it or attempt to do something about it, then you kind of need to be quiet. So instead of being quiet, I have joined these 3 gentlemen, and hopefully we can make a difference.
Okay. Last but not least.
I'm Rick Rabinowitz. I moved to Pottsgrove 5 years ago, in June actually, and we, just like Matt and Kelley, we picked Pottsgrove after doing a lot of research. Specifically, I picked the development that we live in because of its proximity to Ringing Rocks. Unbeknownst to me that it was about to go under a renovation, and that was in fact my first involvement with the school board as well. I attended the same meeting. I was the one who raised my hand and asked if we really needed a geothermal HVAC system, and asked how much it would cost and how long it would take to get what the ROI on it was. And I distinctly remember the silence that preceded those pretty simple and basic questions about investing in a geothermal system that surely was more expensive than a conventional HVAC. And you know, when I've had this discussion with a few people recently, when you're considering buying a hybrid, why is it that so many people don't have hybrids? The reason is because the ROI isn't there because of the extra expense. The government tried to equalize that, right, with tax incentives, and a lot more people started buying hybrids. But the question was very relevant, and that got me started to thinking that our board wasn't really doing its homework. You know, fast forward a year later to the center's decision, and I was up front in center in the opposition to that idea. And you know, when the decision was made and they voted 9-0, and they brought the police in for fear that we were going to have a riot, I decided that I was going to run for the board. It wasn't because it wasn't based on anything other than sincere belief that the method that they used to make the decision was flawed, and that the methods that the current board is using to make a lot of the decisions is flawed. And I cite as exhibit number 1 is the high percentage of 9-0 votes by this board. It's groupthink, and I think it's time for a change. All of the 4 board members that are up for re-election, well, 3 of the 4 board members who are up for re-election have been in place for a minimum of 12 years, 1 for 16 years. They're all great and worthy public servants who've given a lot to the community and are to be commended. But it's time for a change.
You mentioned centers. Obviously, that's going to come up. Obviously, it's going to be an issue. And I wonder if the 4 of you have talked about whether or not you would reverse that decision if you were elected, or whether or not, or whether you would vote to reverse that decision.
I turned it off.
I'll go ahead and field that one first.
Okay.
I think it's important to be neutral to the center's decision. It's been a big experiment.
Mm-hmm.
Pottsgrove has invested in this idea quite a bit. The teachers have bought into it. They have gone through the move. At this point, we need to see what the data looks like in several years, after it's had enough time to fully gestate, and let us know whether the benefits of centers, because there's a number of pros, outweigh the cons. And the cons are fairly significant in that, you know, we're asking our kids to spend perhaps an extra hour a day on the bus, which is time they could be reading, doing homework, learning to play the piano, much more productive time.
Just playing.
But I think that also brings up a point that, yes, we give the centers a bit of time to see if it works, to see if all the expectations that were there come to fruition. But at the same time, with the centers, I think that there are issues that, as board members, we could try to make a little bit better. We could take a closer look at the busing. We could take a closer look at the lines that the kids have to stand in for lunch. Some of the issues that the parents bring up in the district that are real issues, that some of the elementary school kids, they only have, after they've stood in line for lunch, they only have 10 minutes to sit down and eat their lunch. That there are real issues that, without reverting back to the original model of the elementary schools, that there are real issues that we could tackle to make the centers better than what it is right now.
Which speaks to me to the second part of what was flawed about the center's decision. One was the 9-0 vote, but the other major flaw in the decision was the decision to rush the implementation to the following August. The decision was made on February 28th, so that was barely 6 months worth of time to plan for a major change. And we have seen countless issues this year that could have been prevented. And Evan, I'll give you a very personal example. On May 24th, I was picked to chaperone the 5th grade field trip with my son, and I was very excited because I haven't been picked to be a chaperone for a long time. And then I discovered that that's the same day as my 2nd grader's field day in in ringing rocks, and I've never missed a field day for either of my kids. My wife is a teacher. She can't take the Friday before Memorial Day off, and so here I am forced to choose between my second grader and my fifth grader. Now,
Are you chaperoning a field trip?
a field trip in the fifth grade, field day in the second grade.
So you would face that choice even if they were still in the same school building, because the field trip isn't in the
The
building.
field trip would never have been scheduled on the same day as field day because the fifth graders would have participated in field day. And what's more, my issue isn't that mistakes happen. My issue is that they rushed the decision and didn't think through putting in place methodologies that could easily have prevented this. Field day was on the calendar last September. The field trip just could have been scheduled for a different day. It didn't have to be on the same day. And by the way, I'm not the only parent who faced this decision. And yes, maybe it seems trivial, and in the larger scheme, maybe it is trivial, but the point is that little things like that have been happening all year long, and I believe they could have been avoided if the board had simply listened to the community, which was begging them to take its time with the implementation of this decision, even while we were opposing the decision itself.
So it sounds like, I don't know, Mr. Alexander, did you want to jump in, or do you think we've covered
Sure,
that
I mean, I
topic?
can tell you, in particular, I had one child who spent a year at Rocks, and then a year and a half in Pius, and then 6 months back at Rocks, and you know, we took the tour of Ringing Rocks, and we see a brand new computer lab filled with Apple computers. My son was excited, we were excited, and then
And went
6
to Lower.
months later, now he's at Lower.
Right.
He's survived. He's weathered the storm. Kids are resilient, but I don't want to see any kids in particular go through another upheaval. There were goals set for why we were making this change, and we need to have them either proven or disproven, and that's going to take some time. I don't think anybody wants to put the kids or the teachers or the district. It's through this again. It's time. It's money. It's unsettling for kids to keep being moved around, and there are some pros that we've already seen.
Absolutely, there are.
You know, I have a
I've
third
been
grader
beneficiary.
who thinks the biggest thing is that now he gets to be in class with all the kids on his football team. That's the greatest thing in life to him right now. So he sees it as a bonus. But you know, things are important to kids that help them get along in a
Sure.
ever-changing situation. Nobody wants to see the kids or anybody go through that again. But there were goals. There were goals established, and we need to see the outcome.
And do you feel there hasn't been discussion of those goals at this point, or is it too soon? I guess we're
There
not
hasn't
even through
been.
1 year yet. So.
Well, there hasn't really been much feedback other than it's going great from the board. And frankly, they also cite things that were promised as if they happened. And maybe they have. An example was, I don't know if you remember, one of the advantages was they were going to be able to bring back kids who are currently outsourced for special education. And I've seen this now printed on the board's Facebook page that, you know, we brought back kids. But nobody has actually said, oh, well, we brought back 5 kids or 4 kids or 1 kid. They just said that, you know, we've been able to bring kids back. And, you know, there's been no monetary value associated with that. It's very undefined feedback. The feedback we get is it's going great and everybody's happy. And really, everybody is not happy. And certain pockets of our community are more unhappy than others. And I would be doing a disservice if I didn't mention that the people out in Upper and West Pottsgrove are far more unhappy than the people in Lower and in the part of Upper that's much closer to Lower, because they're the ones who are facing the hour-long bus rides,
Right.
and they're very unhappy.
I mean, I will say that there are obviously going to be some significant positive dissenters. One is that with the larger school, the kids can have more specialized classes that are more suited to their academic level. And that, you know, that's important because that may have a significant improvement in the test scores overall, and as well as the whole learning experience. Since, you know, a more specialized classroom has been shown. I looked up some literature just to see, you know, one way or the other with regards to centers or trooping, and apparently some of this was piloted out of California. And they noted that there were significant improvements with with grouping kids together of similar academic capability level, so that there were multiple tiers. So, whether the positives outweigh the negatives at this point, I think it's probably anyone's guess. I mean, I think it deserves a really good look at that data.
But I would say one other thing, and I'm probably in the minority here, but I believe that it's only a matter of time before before lower, the population at lower exceeds its capacity. And whether that's 2 years or 3 years or 4 years down the road, as these new developments get approved, there's going to probably come a day when this question is going to have to come up again, because we'll likely be faced with the question of redistricting yet again, even though the centers were supposed to be good for 10 years, or reconfiguring, possibly moving the third grade back into the K2s and make them K3s. And to me, it seems like if we reach that point, and when we reach that point, we should revisit all possible configurations, including going back to K through 5. And I believe we should put it to the people of Pottsgrove for a referendum. If we reach that time.
It's up to the people.
But that might take, I can't predict when that's going to happen. And until then, we're not for reversing.
Or we might be adding to a building, which is my manufactured segue into the next big issue, which is the high school. Obviously, there's been a lot of work done over the years. I started here in '97, and the only building that I haven't seen work done is at the high school. So I guess it's turn at this point.
92 was the last time they renovated it.
Okay, so I just missed it, I guess. So I'd be interested to hear your views on where the high school project stands, on what how much you think it's needed or not needed, about the costs involved, and let's start with Mrs. Crist for a change.
Sure. I don't think any of us would disagree that the high school needs renovations. Even if you just look at the outside of the building and don't set foot on the inside of the building, it's obvious that something needs to be done. I think we all have listened to what people have said to us on our website and on our Facebook posts. And the renovations, the priorities differ. We do need a new roof. Yes, that's obvious, because if it doesn't get fixed, then it's going to lead to bigger issues. Absolutely.
Right.
The heating and cooling system, that needs to be done. I think, at least as far as I'm concerned, we need to invest the money in the STEM. I work in the pharmaceutical industry, so see on a daily basis how critically important it is for kids to get that education. But then as far as the minor renovations, or not minor, secondary renovations as far as the other vestibule, I think we differ on opinions on whether or not it needs to be done. The security, yes, there are kids. With what happened at Sandy Hook, it terrified me. Having 2 kids that young, security needs to be first for any one of our schools, regardless of how much it's going to cost. But can it be configured to not cost as much as what the architects are telling us? I think it's something that we need to look into. Do we need another gym? I don't think so.
$4 million question.
4.3, just
Yeah.
to be,
Plus contingency.
that's right, it'll be over 5.
It's over 5.
Yeah.
Plus field work. Field work's the other one.
Yeah.
$2 million.
I-
for that.
So do we need another gym?
I think the thing that's important to realize is that we're asking our taxpayers to pay an awful lot. That gym plus the field work together, we're looking at $6 to $7 million. On a 10-year note, that's about $700,000 a year that the taxpayers are going to have to be effectively paying. We get about 35 million in taxes per year, so that's roughly about 2%. 2% of our taxes would go for that.
Mhm.
So if that doesn't happen, that's either 2% that doesn't have to be raised, or it's 2% that could go back to people.
Or 2% that could be spent on,
Or 2%
improving something of an academic
Right.
nature in the school.
So, I think at this point, what we need to focus on in terms of fiscal responsibility is ensuring that we're doing what needs to be done. But in terms of wants, the gym looks like a want. The field work looks like a want.
I agree.
it's not something that we need to be funding right now.
Mr. Alexander, do you agree with that assessment?
Absolutely. I mean, we need to look at investing in things that are going to bring the kids' grades and test scores to an acceptable level. We need to be putting kids out there that are equipped for life and for life's challenges. Math has not gotten more difficult over the last 10 years.
I don't know, I look at my son's homework.
Maybe for us it has. But it's, this, you know, the basics are the same, and we need to find a way to make those improvements. I don't think that prettying up the school, while it may raise student and employee morale, I don't know, but I don't think it's going to have the effect on test scores that we are looking for, which is what we really need to be focusing on.
Mhm.
Obviously, there's improvements that need to be made. I work in the technology field as well, and that's the future of our country. It's my strong belief that we need to be putting kids that are equipped with engineering skills and thinking skills out there, and we need to be preparing them for that. But there's a lot of nice to haves on that list. There's a lot of things that are just, they're built in, and that's what those architects, I'm sure, are good at. Like they said many times during the meetings, if we take one thing away, we have to take 5 things away. I mean,
well, the project, I've covered a lot of these sort of things, and I will say that the project is remarkable for the level at which they've interwoven everything.
Mhm.
Yes.
So that, you know, it's weaved together, so if you pull one string, then all these other things
All these other things
start to come undone. And I suppose you could argue on the one hand that that's an efficient use of resources, that you're trying to reuse spaces and not to just build new when you don't need to. And I'm sure that's the argument that they would make. And I'm sure a pessimist would say, well, they did it that way so that you can't change anything.
It could be both.
I'm not going to impose either of those views on you, but I'm pretty amazed at how much everything is just sort of interlocked.
Now, I have just a slightly different take on the gym and the field. And my feeling is that we probably shouldn't do them. But what I would want to know before, if I were a voting board member, what I would want to know is if there is the possibility for some ROI in the investment in those 2 facilities. For example, they're talking about putting a turf field out, and you know, I certainly have a lot of questions about the safety of a turf field, and there's plenty of studies out there that suggest you're much more prone to ACL injury, for example, when your kid plays on turf. And I don't know why we would want that if that is actually proven to be true, but
I'm not sure how much proof there is out there. I've covered this before, and it seems more like a philosophical argument among people than a factual one, because there seems to be a pile of evidence in both schools of thought.
And fair enough. So then you have to make the call. But forgetting about that, my feeling is that they were talking about the ability to use the fields on a more scheduled and regular basis if we did invest in turf and get much more use of the field, which, if they're selling tickets for the events, could theoretically produce some form of ROI, you know, that could be calculated over a period of time. And if they were able to calculate an ROI that said, well, okay, we invest $2 million in the field, but we'll get payback in 8 to 10 years during the time that we're paying this loan back, then maybe my perspective would change. The same goes with the gym, you know. But if there is the opportunity to generate revenue from it, I'm definitely against it. I just think that...
Did I just hear you propose to raise the ticket prices for football games?
No, you do not.
Just checking. Well, where would that revenue come from?
Well, if you're able to hold more events...
I see. So outside groups using the field, in other words, and because it's turf, it can withstand more of a beating. So do you charge them enough to start making back some of your investment?
And look, I'll admit this is not my area of specialties, so I don't know if it's possible. I'm just saying that I think that as a philosophical approach to spending this kind of money should include thinking about ROI. The HVAC is an obvious example. You know, we're going to put out this money, but it's going to cut our heating and cooling costs by 30% over X number of years, so the system will pay for itself in a predictable manner, and then it really becomes a no-brainer investment. on behalf of the community. Not to mention it makes the high school a much safer place. As I understand it, the CO2 levels in that high school are way high. And so it's a health issue on top of a financial issue. Mm-hmm. My only point is that special education, they want to invest in the special education area, and again, they're saying they want to bring back kids. And if they can do that, and they can estimate what that ROI is, then that makes
sense.
That particular investment a no-brainer.
Absolutely.
And I just think that we're not hearing that. And when I spoke publicly at the last board meeting, that's pretty much what I said, was that we need to start leveling with the community about what the real costs are and not try and hide behind, oh, our taxes won't go up, because what that really means is your taxes won't go down when they could have. That means, what it really means is your taxes are going up. So level with the community about what it really means in terms of costs, tell them what those costs are, and sell the project in terms of its benefits, where the real benefits are.
A good example of that, I think, is particularly using the example that you used of special education, is the budget presentation that they made for the personnel, and and they said that they wanted to bring some kids back into the district, and they were wanted to hire some people to be in the autism room. They wanted to hire some people to handle some of the other special education aspects, and they were giving a budget comparison which said this is what it costs to send them to special school X, and this is what we'll be paying them in salary, but they hadn't included the cost of the benefits.
Right.
Right.
Exactly.
And I'm
Which
thinking,
was another $200,000.
Right. I mean,
which almost doubles it.
Right. So one of the board members thankfully asked the question, but I was amazed that would be presented that way without that information, because once you add that cost in, suddenly the big savings that you're getting from bringing kids back, it's starting to look less like such a hot deal, particularly when you consider that whoever you hire who's going to be there 5 years from now is going to be getting step increases, is going to be getting contractual increases, and whatever else happens in the next negotiation. And so that's where those real costs always are, is in the personnel. Right. And it seems to me that most of those comparisons only happen in the first year. This is what we'll be paying them this year. Okay, what are you going to be paying them in 5 years?
But there's never any feedback to see if it worked. That was my point about the same discussion about the centers, is they just say that they did it, but we don't know what we saved. We don't know. And I also would point out that the administration's approach to presenting information to the board is flawed, for just the reason that you just mentioned. And the board, until very recently, has let them get away with it. Now, recently, since they've had 4 challengers running for election, the board meetings have become all of a sudden a lot more interactive, and the board members are all of a sudden asking a lot more questions. And
a lot more information out there.
I don't want to postulate as to why that is, but I do notice the correlation between the fact that they're being challenged. And I think that it's good that they're asking those questions now, but I think about right before the challenge, when there was a presentation with a 10% increase in the grounds and maintenance area that included a $50,000 investment in landscaping the middle school hill, and not a single board member asked a question. Now, I'm not saying that we shouldn't do something about the eyesore on the middle school, but what I'm saying is that when they've just put a $50,000 total up there and nobody had a single question, that's a flawed interaction between board and administration. Somebody should have said, well, can't we do that for less? Right. Do we have to do this now? What other options do we have other than spending $50,000?
And plus, what are the long-term financial implications of this decision? As soon as we put in landscaping, there's a maintenance cost, right? And I look at the landscaping at Rocks right now, and it's not very well kept. So, are we actually going to be able to keep up with this landscaping? I don't mind a natural-looking field that's up there. We're used to Pennsylvania. This is the way things look.
I would have been interested in a conversation about letting it go natural and putting native plants in there that don't need maintenance.
Exactly.
There you go.
There needs to be more alternative analyses brought forward. There's always just this one decision brought to the board. The board can say yay or nay on it. They normally say yay. Why don't they say, well, okay, that's an interesting idea, but have you thought about X, Y, or Z, and could you please develop these other options?
To be
and allow
fair,
us to have that discussion.
They haven't voted for it yet.
well, but beyond that, there's also, a lot of that happens at the committee level.
It does, but it should be visible to the public.
Well, I mean, so since I have more interest in living a life than going to all of the committee meetings in addition to the board meetings, I don't go there, so I don't see those discussions,
Right.
but they are occurring. And so while I agree with you about it, and again, there's a positive or a negative. The positive may be, well, we've hashed this out so well at the committee level that by the time it gets to the board, there's no need to ask all of these questions because we've already hashed it out. And
Well, and that's what they would have you believe.
And that, I think, is another problem, though, is there's a lot of discussion in these committees that are not public interfacing, and then you have these decisions brought at the board meetings, and the public's just kind of sitting there like, well, why was that
Well,
decision made, and why didn't anybody?
It's hard enough to get the public to come to a board meeting, to get them to go to a committee meeting.
No, I'm not saying bring them to committee meetings, at the board meetings. I think the board meetings need to be a little bit more interactive, where you actually have debate among the board members and with the public.
Or at least an explanation of the discussion
Exactly.
that occurred at the committee level.
Fair enough. And I might add that our board is way behind other school districts in terms of its accessibility to its board meetings. In 1998, when I moved to Phoenixville, I was watching board meetings on cable access. Our meetings aren't televised. Now there's this new invention, it's called the internet, and I see no reason why we cannot bring the board meetings to the people who can't come, people with small children or with other commitments. And I see no reason why we can't open the question and answer period to the public at large, not just to the people who have to physically come to the meetings. And it's long overdue that we do this in Pottsgrove.
And beyond the internet, there's this new invention of social media,
Oh, thank you.
Facebook.
I've heard of it.
I have too. And you know what? I have found it to be a tremendous tool for getting public feedback on ideas, discussions, to actually come to a really good discussion about what should or shouldn't be done. The people are passionate out there. They need to have free voice to be able to be heard. And actually, Facebook provides a wonderful way for them to do it. You know, those interactions on our page have been invaluable for me.
I can't resist this segue. I was going to leave this to the end. Rick already knows about this.
Right.
I want to write a feature story in large part because of what I've seen happening on Facebook, specifically with your election, somewhat less so, but somewhat also still in Pottstown, that there is much more campaigning on the internet, specifically Facebook, in this cycle than I've ever seen before. And I have also been impressed with both camps at the type of discussions which are recurring. So far, I haven't seen a whole lot of name calling. So far, I haven't seen a whole lot of, well, you know, you just say that because back in 1996 you had so and so, or any of that sort of stuff. There has been a genuine discussion of the issues occurring on both pages. Everyone that I've seen, and I don't read them religiously, but everyone that I've seen has been really civil. And I'm just curious about how you guys feel about that. It seems to me that for some of you, it seems, well, what else would it be? For those of us who have seen the darker side of the internet in a variety of ways, I'm just curious about how this comes across to you. Does it seem unusual? Because I cover elections all the time, and I'm just like, holy mackerel, this is what the public square is supposed to be.
I think
it's actually happening.
It's one of the new ways that things get done. It can't be denied. You can, before the election, when Rick set up the communication groups for the different schools, things happen because it gets communicated on that board. A parent asks a question, and because there's something that they don't understand or there's a concern that they have, more parents speak up. Suddenly, parents don't feel alone. They realize that they're not being complainers, or that they're not just out of the informed group of people that know. That informed group of people that does know always shares the information. It's very helpful, and there have been times where a parent asks a question and the next day a letter comes home from the school because they saw something that happened on that page and they realized there's a group of parents out here who don't know what's going on, and a letter comes home with my kid that day telling me what's going on and verifying that, you know, what so-and-so said was true, and you can bank on that. There's been scheduling conflicts resolved on those pages. I mean, they're extremely helpful. And then as the campaign time came around, people get to ask questions. I mean, we can't go to every door. We can't talk to every person who has a question. It takes a lot of ambiguity out of things. We've been able to give very specific and pointed answers to specific and pointed questions.
Both publicly and privately, I might add, because what you don't see are all the private messages that come our way from people who don't want to ask their questions publicly. So the level of interaction is much greater than what you see, and has been since I first set the page up almost 2 years ago.
How has it affected your decisions to run, and then your decisions to sort of be in the race and what your expectations are of being a board member? So, for example, did any of you feel more motivated or more encouraged to run because of what you were seeing on those pages? And you felt like there's a lot of very interested people out there?
Well, and I think even for me, in first setting it up last year, specific to the centers, when I went to the first centers meeting, I was just a parent who wasn't happy. I had no idea if I was alone. Mm-hmm. I didn't know any of the people. Mm-hmm. I was really new to the community still. I knew my close neighbors, and they were against it, but that was like 5 people. And I went to the centers meeting, and I spoke with passion, and I was shocked at the reaction from people who agreed with me. And that's when it occurred to me that this community needs to come together in force to make our point of view known. And Facebook just seemed the natural way to bring people together. But to this day, I'm still amazed at how many people have stayed in our core group for so long, and how many of them contact me. I must say, I've had something akin to 50 people private message me who've never ever post that they support us and that they really appreciate everything that we've been doing. Mm-hmm. They're not out there posting, but they're looking at everything that's being said.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the audience is always bigger than the participatory
Mm-hmm.
portion.
And our opponents are doing that too.
Sure.
And I see them on both pages.
Mm-hmm.
And that's great too, because we in our page, anybody who wants to be in can be in, even our opponents. Mm-hmm. And we don't moderate the discussion. So, to your...
Well, we haven't had the need to yet.
There's a different
thoughts.
Well, with all due respect, if somebody, our rule is no personal attacks. You brought that up.
Yeah.
If somebody makes a personal attack, and they have over the years, I delete it. Mm. The only exception is I've said that if they attack us or the board members, I'm going to let that alone for during the election season.
Sure.
Because I think if somebody feels that way, they should be given a chance to air that point of view, even if it's a direct attack on me, and there have been some. Mm-hmm. But that's a far cry from the uncivil discussions that you're talking about. Yeah. We just don't have them, because you know what? We're all very concerned and motivated parents and residents on these pages, and I would say
they're also dead-end discussions.
What's that?
They're dead-end discussions. They never go anywhere.
What do you mean?
I mean the uncivil.
Oh, yes. Okay.
Because you don't resolve anything, and no one says, "You're right, I'm a jerk. I'm gonna stop doing this." You're concerned about your kids, so you're gonna stay involved.
The thing about the uncivil discussions, they shut down other people, so it's important. It is important that if somebody's being uncivil, they could get a message from one of us just to say, hey, we can recognize you're passionate about this particular issue, but it's good to try to recognize both points of view and state this as a mature and civil way as you can, because that's the way for your point to come across and actually be heard.
Well, we've grappled a lot with this, obviously, on our webpage as well as on Facebook, and we've actually found that the public correction. I mean, some people you just delete because of foul language and that sort of stuff, but that going on and saying exactly what you said, but saying it so that everyone else can see. It's a little bit of a shaming element, but it's also a little bit of a, hey, just dial it back a little bit. We're interested in what you have to say, but you have to stop throwing rocks at people.
Well, and we don't let people hide behind pseudonyms either, right?
Mm-hmm.
With at least I would say...
Much harder to do on Facebook.
It is. It has to be a real profile. If there's a fake profile posting, then,
And it's usually pretty evident.
It is.
Right. I haven't had to delete a curse word ever. Now, there was a uncivil discussion maybe 2 months ago on the Lower Pottsgrove page, and by the time I got to it, there had been like 75 comments, and it was getting out of control. I contacted the original poster, and was able to reach that person on instant message right away, fortunately. And I told that person that I intend to delete that person's post, which will wipe the whole thing out, that it was no criticism of their original post, but that this had gotten out of hand, and I just need to get rid of it, and I hope you understand. The person said that they understood,
Right.
and it was gone.
I'm just impressed that it's now, it's not just yard signs and, who you know anymore. I mean, there's an actual discussion of the issues going on, which in theory is what democracy is supposed to be all about. All right, before this thing runs out, we talked a lot about technology and a lot about facilities, which always comes up. What we haven't talked a lot about is education. You guys mentioned when you started that about where our rankings are and where the test scores are going. I'd like to hear from each one of you, what you think should be done to improve the quality of education in the district, if you do indeed think it needs to be improved. I guess, let's start. Mr. Alexander hasn't started yet, so you get to have the lead off banner on that.
Thank you.
Sure.
That's an easy one.
I'm a pretty firm believer in the goal setting and continuous reevaluation cycle. What I see right now is, especially let's talk about the math program specifically. It's changed already once since my children have been in school with the everyday math program. We're in the process of changing it again. I am very involved in community activities that aren't related to the school, like sports and things of that nature. A lot of feedback from parents is that it's not working. And again, we sit at school board meetings where they talk about how enthused the teachers are and how great this program has become, and that they borrowed it for a little while, but they've argued about giving it back because it's been so great. And I hear positive and I hear negative. But there need to be goals. So here's where we are, here's where we need to be, this is what we're going to do to get there. And as with the everyday math program, the new program that they're talking about implementing now, it feels like that we've been sold a song and dance, and where are the results from the first math program that we were sold that same song and dance? It's been a steady decline. So we need to establish goals.
In other words, the method they used to adopt the new math program, which is to give it to the teachers and see what they think, is the same method that they used to adopt the old program, which
is
all evidence suggests didn't do so well.
That method did not work.
But look,
So
okay,
we need to establish how we implement things, how we track the success of the implementation or the failure, how we retrack when we go back and look and we're not where we need to be. And we need to be able to refocus, take new direction, without throwing the current system out the window and bringing in an entirely new and unproven system. I think it goes a long way in everything we do, but specifically with the math scores and looking at a complete and total revamping of the system again. How are we going to prevent the same thing from happening?
Right. Okay.
And then I happen to have some unofficial information about how we did in Pottsgrove on the Keystone exams. Now it's the first test, and there's going to be another test, and obviously the goal will be to improve. But let me just say that if what I've heard is true, then the results are disappointing, and not really that hard, and yet easily understood, because the curriculum that our Pottsgrove has been using is not aligned with the Common Core. And that's why we're reevaluating our curriculum. There's a 40% mismatch. So the kids who took Algebra 1 3 years ago took a class that took classes that couldn't have prepared them to be
Best they could
proficient.
hope for was a 60.
Pretty much. So, unless they were advanced. But other school districts in our area are doing much better than we are, with the same Common Core. And the only explanation is that they were teaching above the standards to their kids. And we had that opportunity. And another thing I really don't understand while I'm talking about math is I've heard this several times from the administration, different members of the administration. You know, we really had to focus on reading for the last couple of years. And now we're getting around to math. But why couldn't we do both? Why didn't we do both? And how much better would we be if we had done both? Now that's criticizing the past, not looking forward. But to me, it speaks to a methodology that needs correction. And yet we've selected a new math curriculum that basically has been voted on by the teachers, just like Matt said, and we doubled down on everyday math. We didn't gather any data to compare everyday math to alternatives. You know, we keep hammering on data in when we talk.
What's your basis for saying that we didn't get any data to compare it to others?
Because they said they didn't gather any data to compare it to others.
Okay.
That's
pretty good.
Because I asked that question.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't. They just said, you know, look, if you're going to pilot a program, and the only program you pilot is everyday math, and you don't look into any other alternatives, then what are you going to buy at the end of the year? You're going to buy everyday math because you've got to align with the Common Core. So they had no choice. They have no choice but to buy everyday math. They still haven't approved it. But I guarantee you that they will. There's no other alternative. We left ourselves no other alternative. We started with the thesis, we like everyday math, and we want to keep using it. And maybe that was the right answer. But my point is that they did that based on intuition, not data. And we want to change that dynamic and use data to inform our decisions. Rigorous data. And we just happen to have a few members on our team who are superb data people. And so I think that we have a lot to add to the process. If the only thing we did was impose a rigorous data methodology on decisions that are made, then it would be a vast improvement over what we've had for the past 12 years.
And that goes hand in hand with what Matt said, is we need to establish goals and then look at the data that's going to get us to meeting those goals, and not just randomly pick this product or this product to do it. There needs to be a whole lot more research into the ways that we plan on teaching the kids and not changing it up every couple of years.
Right.
Because there needs to be some kind of consistency in the way that these kids are learning. I have a third grader, and I think I've seen 3 different ways on how to do math problems since she started in kindergarten. I do math the old school way, but apparently you need to do it a couple of different ways, which is fine.
Well, I think that methodology, I'm not sure that that's an indication that they've changed over. I think the methodology that they're using is that they want the kids to have multiple ways.
It's true.
Absolutely,
It's
true.
absolutely.
And that's everyday math at its core.
Yep.
Right.
It's cyclical. You know, it keeps coming around back to the same subject and building and building and building. I understand the methodology. Maybe it's great. I hate the lattices personally because I don't know how to do them. And so I can't help
It's a much longer list for me.
so I can't help my children. But I interrupted you.
No.
You know, but at the end of the day, I'm not saying it was the wrong choice. I'm saying it might not be the wrong choice, and we don't know because we didn't do
You're
our
saying
homework.
there's no way of knowing whether it's the right choice.
That's right.
It's called a hypothesis versus a proven, something that's actually proven with data.
Except this is on our. So this
Right.
experiment is on our kids.
It is.
Oh, but that's been going on for years.
And if I can weigh in on this
Sure.
too, you know, I appreciate if you go on our website, newschoolboard.org, and look under our platform under test scores.
Okay.
It's one of the things you can move to there. There's a fairly detailed analysis that we put up that talks about all the schools in Pennsylvania. There's 676 high schools in Pennsylvania, and ranks them and looks at a correlation that happens between the level of poverty in the district versus the test scores. And there's a very strong correlation that's there. You know, and
Sure.
as a scientist, I'm quite interested in that correlation because that provides us then with a relatively more fair or a relatively fairer way of evaluating whether our school is doing that well, because perhaps we just have a higher level of poverty compared to some of the other areas. And so therefore we could expect that our test scores are lower. And to be fair to Pottstown, it has a fairly high level of poverty, and actually it's well above what would be expected by that correlation. So one of the things I state in there is that, Pottstown is actually doing fairly well compared on this ruler. Looking at this ruler, Pottstown teachers are doing fairly well. What's not happening well is what's going on in Pottsgrove. It's very much below the expected line. Our kids should be doing better. They're not.
Based on the economics?
Based on that economic correlation to test scores. It's well below that line. So if you want to go pull that figure, for instance, from our website, please feel free.
I'm sure someone from the Pottstown School District is doing it right now.
Yeah, so Pottstown is actually doing well based on that analysis. And they should. They have had, I've been doing this analysis for years, and Pottstown has been steadily rising. Pottsgrove has been the bottom of the field based on that correlation. And what I did with that is identified that we need to really be comparing apples to apples. We have to focus on districts that have a similar economic profile as Pottsgrove. There are identified 6 districts across Pennsylvania that are in our same economic position, and they're getting fabulous test scores. So why is that? What curriculum are they doing? Can we investigate that and actually pull in best practices that are proven by this data, rather than just kind of guessing and going by gut feeling hypothesis?
From the results.
Well, and to be fair, I participated. I was invited to participate in the 3-year planning session for the district, in which there was a lot of discussion about how the district's great schools, how we model great schools, and we were presented with a list of the habits of great schools, and our plan in Pottsgrove is to replicate the habits of great schools. But what occurred to me at the time, and especially after seeing Don's analysis, is we're doing it wrong, because those great schools might not really be the relevant comparison for us. Instead of modeling generally great schools, we should be modeling the schools that are like us and
doing well.
And doing well, because they have figured something out that's working. So wouldn't it be much more productive to research that than to just look at the generic great schools? We've got lots of great schools in this area, but the economics there are so different.
Sure.
So why compare ourselves to them? I'm not saying that there isn't value in that, but I'm saying that there's another approach that this district isn't taking.
You can take it down. You can drill down a little further.
Right.
Unfortunately, that's what the state did, which amazed me. A few years ago when they did the costing out study. I mean, the Pennsylvania Economy League came to them and said, listen, let's start with successful schools and successful students and work backwards. Let's see what they do, how much money they spend per student. Obviously it takes more than money to make a good student, but that's the level that the state is involved in to a certain extent. And so they developed the costing out study, which had a formula which adjusted for how much money a school district got based on what its local economy was like and what its tax base was like. So one of the reasons that Pottstown may be doing better is they were very deeply involved in, they were watching that very closely when they started to get some of the additional money. I mean, they already knew what they were going to do with it. They put it into early education, and that's sort of where some of that has come out. Unfortunately, when the recession hit and when Corbett got elected, they cut back on state aid to schools, which was expected and made sense given the economy, but they didn't keep the formula. They went back to the year before the formula was adopted, and they said, well, you're getting what you got in 2008. And so the proportionality of it was not kept, which is unfortunate, and no one's been able to convince them to put that back, even though they've now adopted a law that they're going to do it for the special ed, which is about 25 years overdue, but that's a difference.
Well, I have one more thing I want to add on to your question, which was how are we going to improve the schools? I think that we have put a lot of time, money, and emphasis in Pottsgrove and in other districts in bringing up the kids at the bottom. And God knows we need to continue to do that. We need to, we owe them that. But I feel that we've, in the process, really neglected the kids at the top. And I think that that another way you can improve your school is to make it attractive to the best and the brightest, the smartest kids, you know, they're choosing to move to other school districts when they're looking to move because of the test scores, because of the tax rates, because of the property values, for all those reasons. But also because when they look on schooldigger.com and they see that Pottsgrove High School is ranked 376 out of 676, they say, I'm not going to send my bright child to that school. I'm going to find something better. And we need to establish programs that appeal to them as well. And I think that, yes, we have gifted education. Yes, we have programs. STEM is certainly a great example of that, but we need to do a lot more for those kids. And that will also have a big impact on the quality of education at Pottsgrove.
I suspect this thing ran out.
Yeah, that's probably fine.
Although it's got some... No, it's still going, but I don't think it has much more. Is there anything that you guys want to talk about that I haven't asked about? Is there a burning issue that you want to be sure that is covered in this and that you bring before anybody?
I could come up with one or two, but I don't want to steal the show.
Go ahead.
It's all right, I'll just cut you off.
Fine. There have been some. You mentioned how civil the Facebook discussions have, but there was a post on the board's Facebook page that attacked our ethics for in terms of raising money and then putting paid for by candidates on our signs
That you put it, okay.
In other words, we raised money to pay for our.
And they made it seem as if you paid for it yourself.
Well, no. Actually, what they said was that we should have, not put paid for by candidates because we raised money to cover the costs.
Right.
I just filed a finance statement.
Yeah.
I went to Norristown today.
Yep.
I collected $583. I paid $1,499 of my own money, and I have $946 in the hole on this election right now. And I see nothing unethical about doing that. And yes, all of our materials were paid for by the candidates.
Okay.
So, just in case that comes up in your discussion with the board.
Who knows?
I think that's important because, we four are very concerned about this school district. And just like the board members who have been giving their time for free for all these years, we want to do the same thing. And there's no personal benefit to us, no financial benefit, just a lot of time.
There is definitely not that. You guys, with your opening statements, you did away with my usual opening question, which is, what's wrong with you and why are you on
My wife
My
seems
God,
to
you've
be
been to those meetings. Do you see what you're asking people to have you do? Is there anything else that you guys think needs to be raised or touched upon? No is a very acceptable answer on a Friday evening.
I don't think so. I just hope that we're able to light a fire under the voters of Pottsgrove and get them out to the polls on the 21st.
I do have one more very important thing.
Okay.
We are on the Democratic. Don, Kelley, and I are on the Democratic ticket, but we are running a write-in campaign, and we're asking Republicans to write our names in. And Matt is on the Republican ticket, and we're asking Democrats to write him in if they support all four of us.